Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're so glad you're joining us today. Let's give it a minute because I see a lot of participants joining, and we'll start pretty soon. Welcome, everyone. Okay, so let's do it. I think for the sake of those who are here on time, we're excited to host this session with Bill Bliss, language and citizenship educator and Pearson author, as our host, and SHAWN Chakrabarti as our featured speaker. Before we dive in, a few quick announcements. This session's being recorded, and the recording will be shared with all registrants after the webinar. We will also be providing certificates of attendance, slide deck, and some additional assets will be sent to everyone who's joined us live today. And thanks again for being here. With that, I'll hand it over to Bill.
Thank you, Daniela. I appreciate Pearson allowing us to use this meeting platform today to host the session. And I want to welcome everyone who's joining us today. Many of you, perhaps most of you, have recently felt the impact of policy decisions that have resulted in cancellation of federal grants, freezing of government funds, and the termination of government employees or entire federal offices that support our work educating immigrants and refugees. The funding shortfalls have required many nonprofit institutions to reduce their services, lay off staff, or in worst case scenarios, plan to shut down entire programs. I know that many of you have been strongly advocating with your representatives in Congress and to the media to get funding restored. There are also efforts underway to challenge these policy decisions in the courts. While advocacy and litigation continue, programs have been expressing the need to search for financial support from alternative sources in order to maintain services. And that's why we're here today, to explore strategies for outreach to foundations, local businesses and associations, and strategies for donor development. Our presenter is SHAWN Chakrabarti. If you work in citizenship education, you may know SHAWN through his previous position as an education program specialist with the U.S. Office of Citizenship. In this role, he served as a subject matter expert on language acquisition and naturalization, and he was a resource to many of the citizenship integration grantees who have recently lost their funding. Some of you are attending our session today. SHAWN is also one of the founders of a two-generation charter school in Washington, D.C. that's become a national model for immigrant family education. Through his work as a leader and a fundraiser for this program, he has significant expertise to share on strategies that nonprofits can use to secure alternative sources of funding. And I'm grateful that he's able to join us today. One housekeeping note, the chat panel is active, so is the Q&A feature. Please use the Q&A feature for any questions you have, and we'll leave time for them at the end of the session. I should also mention that SHAWN is based in both Washington, D.C. and in India, and he joins us today from Delhi, where the current time is after midnight. So welcome, SHAWN. Thanks for staying up late, and it's wonderful to have you with us for this session. All yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill, for the kind words. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time. And thank you to Pearson for hosting this. It truly takes a village for the work that we do, from the production of all the education materials, which I also have to personally thank you all for. All of you have made me look like a better teacher throughout my teaching years that are there. But again, really, I just appreciate everyone taking the time and looking forward to working with you all today. So let's dive in. All right. So let's introduce ourselves. Use the chat feature. It's open. Share the name of your institution and what kind of education services does your organization provide for immigrants and refugees? Okay, take a few moments and look up, and the chat is open. Thank you. Yeah, I recognize many of you already there. It's great to see. I'm already seeing that we have representation from all over the country. I'm seeing every coast, every um, middle of the country. I'm seeing large cities. I see a few smaller cities. Um, we see citizenship educators, ABE educators on the call. There's a workforce development. I see nonprofits, large nonprofits. I see a couple of smaller ones. Yeah, actually, I see quite a few smaller ones here as well. Right, welcome, welcome, everyone. Yeah, so we can go ahead, keep introducing yourselves in the chat. As everyone can see, this work is truly, it's truly national and truly on global, if you take it. But we welcome refugees and immigrants all across the country, and I really appreciate everything that you do to welcome new Americans. All right, so we have it's great to be able to talk today about fundraising and developing resources specifically for the type of nonprofits and the communities that we serve. I think because it opens up interesting opportunities, and of course we have challenges as well, right? So today on the agenda today, we're going to talk about the state of the field. I'm just going to give a broad overview of the, the nonprofit funding world that's there and the different types of revenue and resources that are there for the nonprofit world. Again, a lot of this will be familiar to all of you, and a lot of you are going through this. So you're that are there. Then we're going to talk about finding sources of grants, right? So specifically, we'll look at some resources to find foundation grants. But then we're going to also talk about how to respond to those grants, like proposals, right? Or letters of interest that you have to submit that are there, right? Then we're going to talk about, we're going to go into one bit of detail. We're going to talk about, I'm going to share some experiences that I have reading grants on the other side when we've read the proposals that all of you sent coming in. I'm going to share a few highlights and tips on some best practices when responding and aligning yourself to the rubric there with it. Of course, AI is, ever present, omnipresent everywhere. So we're going to talk a little bit about some resources that are out there and using those responsibly. And then we're going to shift to another huge opportunity area, which is partnering and developing donors and partners during this time. And at the end of the day, what my deepest wish is that we're going to deepen and broaden this coalition. Our work will not be in vain over these next years. We're going to create very strong partnerships. We're going to enhance our revenue models, and then we're going to come back even stronger with more support for immigrant and refugees. And I don't mean to say that just optimistic. I'm sure those of you that have met me, yes, I can be accused of being a little bit of an optimistic fella, but I can tell you just from personal experience with the nonprofits that I'm involved with in my school. During the first Trump administration, we actually expanded. We strengthened our things. We actually got more programs and more donors in. And now, in this administration, we are also again expanding. We are actually building out an entire new school as well with it. that specifically serves immigrant families, the adults and the children as well with it. So I can tell you the outpouring of support has been amazing. And I think that the work that we do, it'll last, the coalitions that we build. All right, so let's jump in and talk about the big picture, right? The state of the field here. So nonprofits in the United States, it's a huge sector in general. We're as a sectors go, nonprofits in the United States, one of the largest sectors in the world comparatively that are there. Nonprofits do all sorts of amazing work in the United States, and they've done it intentionally since the founding, of the country that are there. There's so many functions of nonprofits. In 2023, federal funding was $303 billion, right? No, individual giving was more than the federal funding. Of course, the federal funding is a huge chunk, right? I'm not saying that we can replace $303 billion overnight, right? But I'd like to highlight, though, the fact that between individuals and foundations, they've always driven, the nonprofit sector, that's there. Also, this is the dollar amount that individuals gave. I'd also like to highlight this does not count the volunteer hours. So many of you on the call, I recognize many of you on the call are volunteers. You're volunteering your time and your expertise. And if that was weighed out, if that we measure that in dollars, that would be billions more, right? Your time and your expertise that's there with it. So individuals across the country have always driven the nonprofit field. It's there. The challenges we see, and again, all of you are living it, so I don't need to tell you, right? There are federal funding freezes, there are cancellations, there's litigation, right? When you get into the nitty-gritty of the grants world, foundation portfolios are affected by stock markets. So I'm generalizing, but one broad way some foundations work is they're giving you a percentage of their return, from their their large pot endowment, right? And so when the stock market fluctuates, right, it affects how much money they're going to outlay, or you're gonna start seeing what I'm seeing right now with grants that I'm working on, that we're seeing a lot of 1-year funding, whereas previously they might have given you a 2 or 3 year cycle. Now they're going to do a year because they don't know what's going to happen, with the stock market, next year. So those fluctuations also affect foundations, right? I've seen some increases where the states are trying to supplement money. States and local city governments are trying to, and foundations are trying to plug some gaps that are there. And then, of course, watching if there's changes to the work. We owe, again, apologize for the acronyms. We owe again, many of you I recognize on the call are very familiar with this, but those aren't. It's the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. And basically that's the large federal act through the Department of Ed passed down to the states that governs adult ed. That is a very large pot of money that's there with it. It's about, nearly, $1 billion in multiplier effects between state contributions and federal monies there that governs all of adult ed, your GEDs, your ESLs, your many community college programs that are there. So there might be changes there with it. We're still waiting and seeing. And there's a new proposed Works Act through some amazing organizations. And again, I don't need to tell all of you, I recognize some of you are on these advocacy calls that are there with it. And all of you, hats off to all of you. It's an amazing bipartisan act. And if that goes through, it's a proposed. So if that goes through, that's another funding stream for workforce development and apprenticeships that's out there. And full credit to all of you for the advocacy work for that. Risky times, as we say, right? But again, what's the impact? As we were researching this, we found lots of success stories, but we also found the challenges out there, right? And so the Urban Institute did a report in February, and the impact, right? The risk of loss for federal funding on this graph here, the darker the blue is, the greater the risk. So if you look at some of the states, or if you look at every state, over half, over 60%, and every state of the country, almost every state of the country, is facing a severe risk due to the loss of federal funding that's there. So all this to say is we're not alone in this, right? This is the entire nonprofit sector, not just immigrant service nonprofits. So we're all in this together, right? Our field is of course unique, right? And there's unique challenges we face, right, in the field. And some of those challenges are specifically my former office where I used to work and met many of you, and I had the good fortune of visiting many of your programs there as well. Unfortunately, the citizenship grant is canceled. I see many of you were former recipients on the call that are there. And so that's one funding challenge. That grant has been canceled. There's different other funding streams that came through federal government on unaccompanied minors. That's also been frozen. It was in litigation. Last I checked a few weeks ago. Again, I see on the call many of you already work with refugees already. You know this, you're living it. You know that there's those grants are frozen from ORR and in litigation. There's also other unique challenges that I find as I talk to all of you that's there. There are certain threats to city offices that some may think do some sort of DEI work. It's not really defined, but there's threats to close down those offices that serve certain populations. And what that means on the ground for us, for example, in some of the places where I've worked, is if you, for example, if there's an office of Latino affairs or different types of offices like that at the mayoral level, if those offices works are threatened with it, well, they don't realize many of those offices also support the nonprofits with little grants and technical assistance that are there, right? So that's another unique challenge we face when we look at the field. I'm sure all of you have read in the newspaper threats to legal service providers that are working with immigrants. There's other types of threats to even nonprofits that do our work, where the nonprofit status is maybe they can attempt to try to take that away there as well. Inflation. Maybe I stare at numbers for too long, but inflation affects us too because our cost levels, especially those of us that rent any space that is out here. I do a lot of my work in the city, in the nation's capital, in DC, and the rental rates for space, for classroom space or anything else we do, events, is gone through the roof. Our food programs are very expensive, to run now. So it does affect our line, our bottom line as well, right? We also we want to pay all of our teachers and staff fair wages, and you have to keep up with the rate of inflation, or we try our best to, right? But keep an eye there of opportunities that come in, and again, I truly mean this because at different times we've actually seen increases in funding. I know it sounds a little bit like an oxymoron with it, but I'm watching if there's any changes to that Workforce Innovation Act Title II, because I'm really in the family literacy world is one of my passions, and so I'm looking to see if there's funding differences there. Charter funding, there can be, and when I say charter funding, I'm specifically talking about adult charter funding with it. This is not related to K through 12 funding necessarily, but adult charter schools, if the environment changes where that is a possibility to open that could be actually a huge increase in your funding streams that are there, right? Washington, D.C. is a very unique place in our country where adult charter schools are allowed with it. And I definitely would love to have all of you come visit there with it, and you can see what that funding model and the way the adult charter schools work and the amount of services that you can give immigrant families that are there, right? So we're just following along to see, and I mentioned there's like the Works Act, proposed in there. So there can be opportunities, lots of opportunities, even during this time that's here. Okay. You'll get all these slides. I just wanted to make a list here of different ways that I think of where we get streams of revenue. And don't worry, you'll have this list. I just wanted to list it just because when you take this back and you think about your organizations, just think about which ones you already do. Of course, you're going to do a lot of these already, but just think about maybe there's one or two little things that you may not do already, or maybe a big thing that you don't do yet. And you could think about that to adding it. I will tell you this, the healthiest nonprofits I have seen and worked with in the country, they have the most diverse streams. They're doing most of these things, right? And it could be small or large, right? For example, citizenship programs that were struggling recently with the loss of funding. And I know we don't like doing this, but some of them started charging, nominal fees just so they could keep a class running. They probably couldn't do what they were doing when they were funded, but they did take, ask the students for a little bit of a textbook fee or different things so that they could keep the class running and get textbooks in there. I also saw some polling where a program actually asked their students. They just polled the students and said, we'd have to close the evening ESL class, or would students be willing to pay a nominal, as little as a nominal fee so that they could keep running a bare bones ESL class? And overwhelmingly, the students said, no, we want our teacher to stay on, and we would, so don't underestimate the strengths in our own communities that we serve that's there, right? And we'll talk about this. We'll highlight a bunch of these today, and we'll talk about it, right? And again, I'm going to say that as we were researching this, Bill and I, we saw so many success stories as well out of the country, right? I'm going to share one of my favorites that I got a chance to meet when I was in New York for a little bit. And this is Emma's Torch is, and we all know this. I mean, I joke. I say sometimes I got into adult ed in ESL because I like eating, right? So you realize all my presentations somehow always devolve or evolve, I don't know, into food, right? Emma's Torch, basically, they're serving, they're helping immigrants and refugees at the program. They're running a cafe. They're doing job training of the refugee communities, all the diverse communities, honing their culinary skills, honing their business skills, running a cafe out of Brooklyn Public Library, but also they now have expanded. They're in DC as well with it. But what this means in the model, if you're thinking about your revenue streams here, so you have your ESL components, right, that are coming in. They are learning, the refugees are learning ESL for work purposes. They're getting their apprentices and technical skills in their culinary programs. But then the cafes, it's a real cafe, delicious. It's a delicious real cafe with great coffee and great food, right? So it's normal price. It's very fair price. So you're getting the revenue stream from there. So it's a whole ecosystem there with it, and I thought it was just a very innovative way to fund, a nonprofit, and delicious way to fund it. That's there. So stepping into the first part, how do we find some grants, right? How do we find some of the money to do this? And foundations was that other big pot of the puzzle of pie that was there. So there's a couple of ways, right? You find foundation grants, right? Well, the free and maybe one of the easiest ways just to get a start is look at our partner, brother and sister organizations that are out there across the country, but look in your own community because many foundations fund in their community, in their regions that are there with it. So look in your communities and look at their annual reports and see what foundations are supporting our colleagues that are there. Um, you're doing similar work, they're doing similar work, they will probably likely fund you as well, right? They're like, oh, you're doing that. We already fund this neighborhood. Let's fund more in the neighborhood. Their missions, many are to improve their communities, right? So you can also get in a little bit into the weeds if you'd like. All 990 nonprofit tax filings are public. So there you have a little bit more detailed list at the bottom of funders that are there with it. So you can look through there and see what's there. You can also use a foundation directory, and I'll show you some examples. Instrumental is sort of like a new kid on the block, or maybe it's new to me. But I'll be honest, I'm recently playing around with Instrumental myself right now. I'll let you know how it goes with it. So that's one database. Candid is another one that's been around for a long time. I mean, they rebranded, but they've been around for a long time as well with it. And I'll show you some of it. So this is what Candid looks like now. It's a foundation directory. It has lots of data and pretty easy to see, right? You can like click on it. This is one example of a large one, but you can click on your literally your state and your area, and you'll get a more accurate you know, thing about who's funding right in your area. And of course, you filter by immigrant adult education, immigrant integration, all of those type of civics. You can filter by and look at it, right? But there's always a catch, right? I mean, if this was easy, then we would all be writing grants away. One of the catches with Candid is that it's a paid subscription and it's a little hefty. But there's good news. I'm going to leave you good news with all throughout this. Your public library, librarians are awesome. Always librarians are wealth if you're ever trying to research any topic, right? Your many public libraries will get you Candid access for free. So you go into your public libraries and you can use this and try to do some research and then come back and then individually go to each foundation website that's there with it. Thank you for suggestions also as well in the chat for other resources as well. Thank you. I really appreciate all of you. I learn as much as on every session that we do. Instrumental is another one. It is paid, but there's a 14-day free trial. And I'm doing the trial right now. I'll let you know how it goes. I found it very user-friendly so far. I'm doing the trial version. There are different tiers of payment and stuff like that with it. But again, it was pretty user-friendly. You can go by location, type. It's also a grant management thing. If you're in a large organization, you write a lot of grants, maybe it could be either AI could be useful if you're trying to write a bunch of grants at the same time and manage the workflows and things like that. That's there. I'll give you an example now of some grants that I found just recently. So these are live active grants. I'm looking at them myself. This is literally the results I've done this month when we're preparing for this webinar that's here. So her block, I found this one because I was just interested in it. So as many of you know, I've taught, teach civics and citizenship, right? And our block was a cartoonist, and there's a lot of really fun cartoons. So if you ever want to, there's a lot of civics and citizenship you can teach through cartoons that are there, political cartoons through the time. And the Her Block Foundation, stems from one of the political cartoonists, right? Anyway, I see here that under their Pathways Out of Poverty program, they had adult education that was there, right? And the way Her Block website, I read the eligibility. So what I do is I check the eligibility. So it's the organization ready? Is my organization eligible? First of all, make sure you're eligible, right? It may not serve your area, it may not, right? They say you have to write a letter of interest and then they'll get back to you. So if you get accepted, your letter of interest gets accepted, then you get back to invited to put in a full proposal, and then they'll consider the funding that's there with it. And so they had civics grants and citizenship, like promoting citizenship. So of course, my search is keyword into citizenship because that's one of my passion areas. So I saw citizenship, it pulled up in my search engine grants that are there with it. I was like, okay, so promoting citizenship. So I'm like, okay, we do that, right? We do talk a lot about voting and different things in my classrooms and things like that. So that's one we consider. Dollar General is another grant. Those of you, if you're new to the grant writing world, I strongly recommend looking at this. Dollar General has supported adult education in our country for a long, long time. They are amazing sponsors of COABE, the Coalition of Adult Basic Education. You'll see them at conferences, sponsorships. They also have grants about every year. They have so many different types of grants. As you see here, they have adult education grants, but they also have, of course, my favorite way of teaching is family literacy, 2-generation approaches. So they have family literacy grants specifically. And their website is clean, easy to read. The application process is very straightforward. Check your eligibility requirements. I believe one of the eligibility requirements is that if there's a Dollar General store, I think a certain number of miles away from your organization, you're eligible, right? So those are some examples of foundation grants that you can find that's there. Okay, so now that you found some grants, right, that you're going to look at, right? I tried to distill, so every application is a little different, right? But I tried to distill something that's the same across everything. So every federal grant I've worked with on any side, meaning writing it, or on the other side, like reading the applications and scoring them, they all kind of have the same section, even though it's a little different. It's a statement of need, right? You have to make the case for why your program is needed, right? And specifically for us, and I'm really grateful to be able to work specifically with those of us in our field, because now I can give you very specific examples, right? Because of course, if you're like a nonprofit that does medical services, then that statement of need is a little bit different, right? Versus us, what we're doing in immigrant education and refugee education, right? And so a strong the statement of need has two essential elements: passion and data, right? And the passion's already there. There's nothing to teach there, right? All of you already have it, and then you just add the data to it, and you're going to get a good statement of need, right? And I'm going to leave links on data for our field. Again, I'm really happy to be able to work directly with us with this, right? Again, you're going to get this. So I just made a list of some of the common denominators I think I've seen in almost every immigrant serving application, federal foundation, everywhere. What are the different data points that go into one with it? And again, you'll get this, and we'll talk about this and with examples, but you'll get this in the slides, so you don't have to try to do all this. But all of this, as you can see how this affects immigrant and refugee communities that's there. One specific thing, the last bullet, I'll definitely highlight: address the consequences of not funding, of underfunding, right? Not only today during this turbulent times, right? I mean, in general, right? Always say like, hey, this is the consequence. These are the economic impacts. These are the employers that can't hire, right? That's there, right? I'll give you examples. It was too much to put a whole statement of need in there, like examples that are there with it. I'm just giving you an example of some powerful sentences that draw the reader out when we are reviewing grants on the other side that's there with it, right? Statements that are specific with the data, right? And you show where you got the data from there as well, right? So you look at the poverty rate, right? And you're not just saying the poverty rate is 6%, right? You say it's 6% higher than the national average, like statements like that. So it's telling us that this area needs more help, right? you can use, I'll go over the data sources as well for our field that's in there, that I honestly, I use it for every grant I think I've written for the longest time. So I'll give you the links to those data websites that are there. I use the census, I use PIAC, and I'll give you all those links that are there. Show the effects of low literacy and not having these programs, right? Employers are unable to hire. You can give impact statements like our highlight the strengths and successes of your program with data. Like 97% of your students get jobs after, right? I know this from, I recognize again, many of you on the call, many of you told me your stories that your citizenship pass rate is a 100%. I mean, write those in your grants that your programs are very effective programs that are there, right? Statement of need. One, again, I'm going to highlight the consequences. And again, I shortened a paragraph. Again, you have more space in a real application, but I wanted to try to just highlight the flow of a paragraph that's there with it, right? That there's highlight the unmet need, right? So there's only a few organizations in your county, in your area that does this work, or that there's thousands. There could be a lot of organizations, but there could be a lot of students, right, as well in large cities that are there. Wait lists, highlight how long the wait lists are, your organizations, your partner organizations that are there with it. And then you make it apolitical, right? Don't get into a lot of into the weeds. Everyone's aware of the situation. You just state that the recent changes had this exact impact, right? For example, in this example, you reduce that, our entire citizenship program went, or we serve 50% less students in our classes, or there are no more evening ESL classes in the entire area, you know, and then highlight the need that's there with it. The reason why you just get to the point with it, remember when applications are reviewed on the other side, I can tell you this, don't assume there's knowledge of the reader, okay? They can get subject matter experts, but they can also get different readers. And again, they might get a subject matter expert, but sometimes I'm reading something that could be from an organization in Ohio or California. Like it could be someone from across the country. So I don't exactly know who's the detail of that condition on the ground, right? So, all right, let's look at, let's do an activity in the chat, right? All right, you've done your research, you find a grant for $50,000, right? In the chat, just write a quick 1 or 2 powerful sentence on what exactly you'll use that money for and what will be your smart outcome, your measurable outcome at the end of that year, right? Pretend like, give me your sales pitch, your elevator pitch right now. 50,000. Pretend I got 50,000, and I'm gonna ask you, okay, what are you gonna do with it? So take a few moments and go ahead and drop that in the chat. All right, great. Has some of the answers coming in? Great answers. Yeah, we've got some in the chat coming in that they'll use the money. Of course, you already got me. If I had $50,000, I'd give it to you right there. This group will expand, you know, help entire families with the money by improving their communication strategies, right? Citizenship, or, you know, reinstating citizenship programs, oh, we're getting some nice specific ones. This would reinstate part of a salary for a case manager to work with clients one-on-one with N400. Great one. Yeah, that's very specific and measurable. Like in your budget, it'll be like, 0.5 FTE will go for this exact thing to help that, right? Great, great answers. Keep them coming. We can talk about them and look at them, right? Great, yeah, replacing ORR. Many of you are giving, and the highlight here, the takeaway here is many of you are giving very tangible, specific answers of what you're going to do. And that's exactly what we're looking at. Exactly what you're going to do with the money, right? You're going to hire exactly this person. You're going to serve exactly this many people, and you're going to meet this unmet need that's there, right? Yep, many of you started putting statistics in there. Yep, exactly. 80, where you're going to achieve this exact goal. 80% of your students are going to get employment. Yep. Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Yes. All of you get grants, right? But yeah, but Joe, those are the strong statements, right? That are there. Another strategy for success that's there, and this all ties right into it, right? Is following the rubric closely. I think this is one common takeaway I want to see from things that I see coming in when I read grants as well, is that they're amazing organizations, but I know it's tedious, but these large grants have very specific scoring rubrics, and they publish them many times, foundation grants or federal grants or state grants. Follow it very closely and answer every bullet that's there. Many times, really great organizations miss a bullet, right, in the paragraph. I mean, I know it's hard, like, to follow each one. It gets tedious, but go back, recheck, and check it again. Don't wait till last minute to work on a grant. I'm guilty of doing it all the time, but don't, because I miss a bullet in there that we could have easily got a point for, right? Don't just repeat phrases. If it says increase enrollment, don't say we will increase enrollment. Say exactly how you're going to increase enrollment, things like that. Use the same headings as subheadings as the rubric is another tip. Is, again, assume your reader is reading a bunch of applications, right? The cleaner your application is, the easier it is for the reader to see where you're putting each section, and they literally go down and score, right? As we go down each application, right? Introduce your acronyms, initialisms, right? Again, don't assume that the reader has prior knowledge. Again, even when I read many of your citizenship grants or other adult ed grants, I may understand the field, but I don't know what's going on in another state that I've never worked in, right? So I won't know what some acronym means or how your exact workforce development board works versus the state I work in. So just don't assume the prior knowledge. And I'll give you an example of a United Way scoring grant. This is literally what we would use on the back end to score these things. That's what they would use with their graders, right? They're going to, this is parts of a rubric, right? There's literally the rubric, and they will go back and say, like, okay, are there partnerships, coalitions? Is it clearly there? Are there MOUs like that? And they literally just add up points for that, right? That's there. Another big thing that you'll see when you start looking at foundation grants, just from my experience, is sustainability. The grants will ask, so many of these grants could be for a year or so, and so they'll ask about sustainability plans that are there. And so that comes from your partnerships and your other donors that are coming in there, and we'll talk about those as well, right? And then I do have to make this note about AI, because AI is, everywhere nowadays, but you have to use it responsibly, right? It can help you a lot. I'm not going to be one of those people who say, oh, AI, because it's there and people are going to use it. But I would just say use it responsibly, because you have to remember, you have to protect your nonprofit and your students' data. Don't go uploading all that stuff into AI machines, right? That's there. Also, plagiarism, if you just run it through AI, plagiarism can disqualify you, right? Because AI could just pull someone else's application from a previous year that's up on the internet, and it can drop it in, and then plagiarism won't get you anywhere, right? Also, I found, this is just today, I mean, of course, maybe it'll change later, but I found AI and data is not very good. They don't cite the statistics accurately, even like paid AI. They're not citing it in the exact powerful way that we as teachers or all of you will know the impact on the ground for our communities, right? I want to highlight also what we talk about sustainability and what how powerful partnerships are. So we talked about finding grants, finding foundation grants, finding the money. Of course, money is needed and good, but let's not overestimate how important the future of nonprofits and the trend of every foundation federal grant that I've seen. The trend is they're going to want you to partner. And again, I'm sure many of you already know this. I can tell by the way some of you have written your statements of need. I'm sure you have plenty of partners already. Your business and local partners. These can be your local businesses, but also your large national businesses that operate in your areas that they do all kinds of support, right? They can give you everything from funding straight up. They have foundations that can give you funding, but they also can do apprenticeship programs, right? Or they can even give you curriculum input. They can say, this is the customer service ESL we want to see, you know. They definitely help when you have MOUs in federal applications and foundations. When you have an MOU with your local business organization, it strengthens your application packets that go in, right? So it's definitely worthwhile to cultivate these. And the tip that I would give is many of you already are partners with these organizations, but get it in writing. Because everyone says, oh, I've been partnering with this person forever. And I believe you, I mean, I do it too. There's people that I just know in DC for years and years, right? But then if you ask, like, I have no way to actually prove it in an application. I'm like, I've just known them for years. I mean, but that doesn't work in an application. They want to see it in writing what the relationship is. So cultivate your local partnerships, that are there. Another huge source that, and this is personal to the work that I do in my organization, university partners have been key to riding out the waves of this type of crisis that we're in with it. And I'll explain all the way universities get involved with an immigrant serving nonprofit that's there. I'll just highlight so many things that we've done in recent times, like with it. So number one, we talked about cuts to legal services for immigrant providers, right? I'm lucky that I'm in a city where, you throw a stone up in the air, you're gonna hit like 3 lawyers on the way down. There's great law schools everywhere, and with it, and they have immigration clinics, right? So if your Department of Justice accredited pro bono reps are overwhelmed during this time, they're doing so many things, holding the front lines down. The universities have bandwidth to take some of that caseload and help you, the law schools, to help you with those legal services, right? And of course, the students are supervised by a bar professor, the professor, right, that's there with it, right? But it's not just legal services. I've literally mapped out every almost department. I mean, some universities in DC are probably sick of seeing me. Almost every department wants to give back and give their students real experiences. And your nonprofits are the realest experiences that they are in the real world. I'll give you another example, marketing, right? I came from the nonprofit world. We didn't have money for fancy marketing budgets, but their MBA students in another MBA program did. And so we were a semester-long project of MBA students in marketing that did branding design, logo design, and things like that, and fundraising campaigns. They laid it all out. That was the students' project. They got to see the impact. The students got to learn about immigrant education and got to visit a lot to the programs. It was very rewarding. That's there. Teachers, you need teachers at this time. Get your masters in TESOL students out into your programs. They have to do apprenticeships, right? So many programs do apprenticeships, right? You have to do a teaching practicum, basically. The MA students were perfect for citizenship because citizenship is a little bit more discreet, where in a semester you can actually cover a lot of the content. And then, of course, you can invite the student to the oath ceremony. And there's never a dry eye in the room. It's always like, who cut the onions? But the students see the impact of their work, that's there with it, right? Right. Also, your community support. Many of you are already recruiting volunteers and doing things, right, that are there, right? You have huge volunteer recruitment that's there, right? But leverage your recruitment, your volunteer recruitment, and see there's so many people. I can tell you, we're overwhelmed where I am. We're overwhelmed with actually volunteer applications. We have too many volunteers than the volunteer coordinator can handle with this. There's so many people that want to give back, harness their skills and expertise to the best of your ability. Another great success story, this is recent. When Bill and I were researching this, Bill found this organization, Catholic Community Services, doing great work with refugees. They've been in Utah for a long time. They, of course, faced all that funding cuts, millions. They're larger, so they lost a large chunk of their money during to this part. But through to really innovative fundraising, they got more than half of that money back, right? In donors. And the way they did it, one of the ways they did it was they had a major donor, your high donor, that's there, and they leveraged that like through matching grants. So they used that money, but they used it for matching, so they got more money from people, and then they did matching challenges and drives, so that one large pot of money multiplied out in their campaign that's there with it, and they were able to get back a large, more than half of their amount of money, which is just amazing, right, for the organization. So, and again, finding these donors, and all, there's a lot of people willing to help. There's a lot of ways that you can leverage donors and volunteers that are there, right? You'll get the PowerPoint. Bill will put in all the links in the chat for the data resources I mentioned and websites. I'll just put some of my takeaways in there, that like data gets you the dollars, that's in there, right? Good, strong statement of needs with data help, right? Work with your small business associations and local libraries, right? They have lots of help for nonprofits that are there. And join your national coalitions. You are not alone, right? In this, right? Their advocacy, but they're also always willing to help these organizations. You'll meet people there with it. Partnerships part, I cannot stress this enough. Partnerships, get an MOU. Partnerships and get an MOU are going to be key, and they won't go to waste, because even 4 years from now, when all the funding comes back, you're going to have these relationships, right? So over the years, I have like a stack of MOUs. And so if anyone ever comes in, I'm going to bombard that application. I got like 12 MOUs of organizations that'll support us, with it. And use AI. If it saves you time, use it, but just do it responsibly, and be aware of your data, right? And again, Bill will send out all of this information to you, the links and everything that's there. I get the data from certain Census Bureau. Always, I use it. PX Skills Map, I always use it to show literacy rates in the communities I'm working with. For immigrant information and citizenship data, there's University of Southern California, Dornsife Institute is amazing for data that's there. And the coalitions that have personally helped me throughout my career. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for, COAB and TESOL. When I first started teaching, I did not know what I was doing at all. And they made me a lot better a teacher and person, probably, with it. Bill, I'll turn it over to you for any Q&A or any thoughts. Bill, if I highlight anything or anything we can cover.
Sean, that was great. I'd encourage anybody who wants to toss into the chat or the Q&A if you have any questions for Sean. I've answered a few of them along the way that appeared in the chat, which were more clarification questions. But If anybody has any particular questions, please let me know. I had planned to put a bunch of links into the chat right now, but for some reason, copy and pasting is not cooperating right now with that. But you will receive tomorrow in a follow-up email from Daniela, you'll receive a few things. You'll receive SHAWN's slides from the presentation. You will also receive a certificate for attending, and you will also receive a listing as a document. It'll be a Microsoft Word document with hyperlinks to a host of resources. And I would just call your attention for those of you who are in the meeting who are citizenship grantees, the National Association of Latino Elected Officials just a few hours ago posted an updated version of their advocacy toolkit. The effort to get those grants restored is still ongoing. It's a combination of letter writing, phone calling, and congressional pressure, and as well potentially litigation. But on the advocacy side, I just want you to be aware that one of the things that you'll receive in your follow-up email tomorrow is a link to that new advocacy toolkit. I believe it's the third version of it because it's been a moving target, continually updating things. You're all offering some very, very generous feedback. I don't see any particular questions. We've got a couple of minutes. I would just like to say that it was a pleasure working with SHAWN on this. And as you can see, not only his experience with this on the citizenship side as a former Fed, but also on the leadership side within nonprofits, is just an extraordinary combination for us right now. And I feel very, very fortunate that he was willing to do this and that he truly is dedicated to continuing this work. Many of you who have known him for a while have known him on the government side of the table on this, on these matters, but his dedication to our immigrant and refugee populations is really unmatched. And I'm really, really grateful for your time today, SHAWN. And especially given the fact that you're 9.5 hours ahead of us in Delhi right now, and it's time for you to turn in, I suppose. Any other questions at all? Thank you for all of the thank yous. And one of the things that I will do is I have copied and pasted from the chat all of the terrific examples that you came up with of possible statements of need. And I will, without listing your names, I will share that list anonymously so that you've got some really good nuggets of 2 to 3 line statements that can perhaps prompt you to think of some ways in which you might want to fashion an ask to some of your local donor possibilities. So again, thank you very much. We had, according to Daniela, over 250 people registered for this today. It was nice to be able to have Pearson provide this platform for us to have this level of impact. SHAWN, anything else that you'd like to offer?
Just that I'm humble and thank you for everything that you do. All of you keep me, you guys are giving me the hope while I'm sitting here in India watching everything. I feel a little restless, and you know, I'd probably drive my wife crazy ranting and raving about citizenship and issues. So thank you for giving me an outlet to be able to be in touch with everything. So yeah, thank you all.
And Daniela, let's give it back to you. And again, thank you to you and to Pearson for offering us this platform for this meeting. It was really, really important to be able to do this.
Thank you, everyone. I just saw someone mentioning I just had a student passing today, so that's the whole reason we're doing it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, SHAWN.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill. We'll follow up with all of the resources we promised tomorrow. Have a good one.